Have you ever wondered how people brushed their teeth in the Middle Ages? When you picture a medieval mouth, you might imagine rotten teeth, a mouth full of decay, and people who never even heard of toothpaste. But what if I told you that medieval people actually cared a great deal about cleanliness, and that they had their own clever, and sometimes bizarre, ways to keep their teeth clean and their breath fresh? Tonight, we'll travel back in time to discover how people really brushed their teeth long before toothbrushes, toothpaste tubes, and dental checkups ever existed. You're listening to History for Sleep, the place where history drifts gently into dreams. If you haven't already, take a moment to subscribe and join our cozy community of nighttime historians. It helps more sleepy minds find their way here, and it means you'll never miss a calming journey into the strange, fascinating past. While you're here, let me know in the comments what kind of history you'd like to hear next, or when you like to listen. Do you put these stories on as you're falling asleep, or while you rest through the night? Your thoughts help shape the next stories we tell. Now, settle in. Find your most comfortable position. Let your shoulders drop, your breath slow, and your mind quiet down as we step softly into a world lit by candles and warmed by the faint scent of herbs. In this gentle corner of history, we'll explore what it really meant to care for your teeth in the Middle Ages, from humble peasants with rough linen cloths to nobles who rinsed with wine and mint. You'll hear about tooth powders made from crushed bones, mouthwashes of vinegar and salt, and strange superstitions involving tiny worms said to live inside aching molars. So as you close your eyes, imagine the echo of footsteps down a narrow, cobblestone street, the sound of a wooden bucket at the village well, and the soft hum of monks mixing herbal remedies by candlelight. Together, we'll all uncover how people really brushed their teeth in the Middle Ages, and how even then, a clean smile was something worth striving for. Let's begin our journey back in time. In the Middle Ages, a smile meant more than just friendliness. It was a quiet mirror of who you were, your health, your class, even your soul. When people looked into one another's faces, they didn't see just teeth. They saw a reflection of discipline, cleanliness, and sometimes even morality. Though it's easy for us to imagine a medieval villager with yellowed or broken teeth, many people of the time actually prided themselves on maintaining a clean and healthy mouth, even if their methods were far simpler and stranger than ours. To understand how people cared for their teeth, we have to understand how they thought about beauty. In medieval Europe, beauty was tied to order, balance, and harmony, ideas deeply rooted in religion and philosophy. A well-groomed person was seen as one who respected God's creation. Monks wrote of cleanliness as a form of piety, and noble women were often described in poetry as having teeth white as milk or bright as pearls. These weren't just metaphors. They reflected genuine admiration for clean, healthy teeth. A beautiful smile, even then, was something people noticed and valued. However, keeping that smile meant more than brushing. It meant maintaining health through diet, prayer, and discipline. People believed that inner virtue could show outwardly, that a pure spirit might bring a clear complexion and a fresh breath. Conversely, bad breath or tooth decay was sometimes interpreted as a sign of sin, laziness, or gluttony. In sermons, priests even warned that neglecting one's body could be seen as neglecting the soul. The body, after all, was God's creation, and to let it fall into filth was to disrespect the divine order. Of course, not everyone had the same access to care or luxury. The rich had mirrors of polished metal, scented oils, and imported powders. The poor had rags, salt, and whatever herbs grew nearby. Yet even the simplest peasant woman or farmer might take time each morning to rinse her mouth with water from the well, or to rub her teeth with a bit of cloth dipped in ashes or vinegar. Cleanliness, though humble, was still a daily habit, not a forgotten one. It is important to remember that medieval people didn't think of hygiene the way we do. They had no germ theory, no understanding of bacteria, and no fluoride to strengthen their enamel. But they had observation and tradition. They knew that a clean mouth felt better, smelled better, and made eating more pleasant. And they passed that wisdom down, generation after generation. The concept of morning washing was already common, and in monasteries, strict routines of bodily care were expected. Monks and nuns might wash their faces, hands, and mouths as part of their spiritual discipline, cleansing both body and soul. A good smile could also carry social meaning. For nobles and merchants, good teeth could hint at wealth and refinement. Food played a role. The rich had access to more meat, wine, and sugar, but they also had access to herbal rinses and tools for cleaning. Poorer people, though eating simpler food, benefited from diets low in refined sugars, which ironically helped preserve their teeth. Many skeletons from medieval Europe show surprisingly well-preserved teeth, especially compared to those from later centuries when sugar became common. A peasant's smile may not have been gleaming white, but it was often strong and intact. And then there was the question of breath, the invisible signal of health or decay. People were keenly aware of it. Medieval texts described foul breath as a mark of imbalance in the humors, especially of too much heat or corruption in the stomach. A person's breath could reveal illness or excess. To remedy this, they turned to herbs. Mint, rosemary, sage, and parsley were prized not only for cooking, but for keeping the mouth fresh. Even the wealthy chewed aromatic spices, like cloves or cinnamon after meals, both to sweeten the breath and to aid digestion. So, the next time you picture a medieval smile, imagine something more complex than crooked yellow teeth. Imagine a person who rinsed their mouth each morning with cold water, rubbed their teeth with a sprig of mint, and perhaps whispered a short prayer while doing so. Imagine the effort to stay presentable, to smell pleasant, and to feel clean in a world without modern comforts. A medieval smile was both practical and spiritual, a balance between nature and nurture, between the outer body and the inner soul. As the candles flickered and the days passed in quiet rhythm, keeping one's teeth clean wasn't just about vanity. It was about order in an unpredictable world. The same way they swept their hearths and washed their faces, people also tended to their teeth, a small, daily ritual that connected them to a sense of dignity and care. It was one more way to make life a little brighter in an age of darkness. In the chapters to come, we'll step further into this world, exploring what people ate, what harmed their teeth, and what strange cures they trusted to keep their smiles intact. But for now, picture that first morning light falling across a medieval village, and a man or woman beginning the day by taking a sip of water, rinsing it around their mouth, and starting life anew with a clean breath and a hopeful heart. To understand how people in the Middle Ages brushed their teeth, we first have to understand what they were brushing away. Diet shaped not only their health and strength, but also their smiles. The medieval diet, though varied across regions and classes, left unmistakable marks on their teeth, some good, some dreadful. The food they ate, the way it was cooked, and even the way they chewed, all played a part in shaping medieval oral health. For most people, daily meals revolved around bread. Bread was the foundation of life, coarse, dense loaves made from barley, rye or oats for peasants, and lighter, whiter wheat bread for the wealthy. This staple, baked in wood-fired ovens, often contained bits of grit from millstones, which over time wore down the enamel of the teeth. Archaeologists have found medieval skeletons with teeth worn almost flat from years of chewing such gritty bread. Even so, the natural texture of their food helped scrape away plaque and debris. In a strange way, that roughness cleaned as much as it damaged. Beyond bread, a typical medieval diet for the poor consisted of pottage, a thick stew of vegetables, grains, and sometimes a sliver of meat. It was filling, warm, and easy to make, but it clung to the teeth. Without sugar, The peasants avoided the kind of cavities we associate with modern diets, but the constant starch and grit still caused slow erosion. Those who could afford more, the nobles, merchants, and clergy, indulged in richer meals. Roasted meats, fish from the rivers, cheeses, butter, and sweetmeats, flavored with imported honey, or, in rare cases, sugar. And it was that sugar that would begin to change everything. Before the 12th century, sugar was a rare luxury, imported in tiny quantities from the East. It was prized as medicine, not candy, believed to balance the humors and preserve the body. Wealthy Europeans sprinkled it on fruits or used it in medicinal syrups. But even in small doses, sugar left its quiet mark. Over time, it would carve the first cavities into noble smiles, while peasants' teeth, though worn, stayed largely free from decay. Ironically, the poor had stronger teeth, not because they were cleaner, but because they simply couldn't afford the sweetness that rotted them. Drinks also played a role. Water, though common, wasn't always trusted, especially in towns. People drank weak ale, mead, or wine as daily beverages. Ale was often low in alcohol, made for hydration more than celebration, and its grain content left behind residue on the teeth. Wine, with its acids, might have stained and softened enamel, particularly for those who drank it often. Still, most beverages were consumed with meals and followed by rinses, sometimes of water, sometimes of wine itself. A simple swirl of liquid after eating helped wash away bits of food, and it's one reason many medieval people avoided the worst buildup of decay. Herbs and spices played a subtle, almost secret role in keeping the mouth fresh. Mint, sage, and parsley weren't just flavors, they were functional. People chewed them after meals to freshen the breath, reduce bad odors, and soothe the stomach. Cloves and cinnamon, when available, served a similar purpose among the wealthy, who prized sweet breath as a mark of refinement. In fact, records show that some nobles carried tiny pouches of herbs to chew discreetly after feasts, much like mints today. And then there were the teeth of monks and nuns, those who lived on modest diets in the cloistered quiet of monasteries. Their meals were plain: bread, vegetables, lentils, sometimes fish, and rarely meat. They avoided excess and gluttony, which meant their teeth suffered less from sugar or acids. Yet, the lack of variety also meant deficiencies: calcium, vitamin C, that could weaken gums and bone over time. Their smiles may have been sincere, but often fragile beneath the surface. Chewing itself affected oral health in subtle ways. Medieval food was tougher, fibrous, and less processed, requiring stronger jaws and more grinding motion. This kept gums exercised and blood flowing, nature's own way of maintaining dental health. Yet the ever-present grit and grain husks meant that teeth wore down faster. Elderly peasants often had smooth, flattened molars by the time they reached 50, a result of a lifetime's worth of chewing tough bread and gruel. What's fascinating is how closely diet and belief intertwined. Medieval thinkers tied food directly to health through the theory of the four humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Every food was classified as hot, cold, moist, or dry. To keep the humors in balance, one had to eat accordingly. Garlic and onions were hot, thought to purify the body, while fish and grains were cold. Some even believed that dental pain came from imbalance, not infection, and adjusted their meals in hopes of soothing it. Sweet foods were sometimes prescribed for melancholy, while bitter herbs were used to cleanse the stomach and mouth alike. When we imagine a medieval table, a loaf of bread, a wooden bowl of stew, perhaps a jug of ale, it is easy to forget how these simple meals shaped not just the body, but the mouth. Every bite told a story, of class, of culture, of belief. From the courtly feasts of sugar-dusted pastries to the peasant's steaming bowl of pottage, the foods of the Middle Ages laid the foundation for their smiles, strong, stained, or sometimes painfully absent. And so, every morning's tooth cleaning wasn't just for vanity. It was survival. It was a quiet effort to protect what nature gave them from the harshness of daily life. A peasant might rub his teeth with ashes after breakfast. A noble might rinse with wine and herbs. Each in their own way fought the slow wear of time and hunger upon their teeth. And though they didn't know about bacteria or decay in the way we do, they understood something just as important, that a clean mouth, like a well-tended hearth, made life feel just a little more civilized in an otherwise wild and weary world. Long before dentistry existed as a science, tooth decay was a mystery, and a painful one. For the people of the Middle Ages, aching teeth were not merely an inconvenience. They were a torment that could last for days, weeks, or even years. Without modern medicine, without dentists or anesthesia, people sought answers wherever they could find them, in religion, in superstition, and in the strange wisdom of the body's humors. They understood pain intimately, but did not know its cause. And so, they filled the silence of their suffering with imagination. One of the most enduring beliefs of the time was that toothaches were caused by creatures called tooth worms. These tiny, invisible worms were said to burrow into the teeth, gnawing and writhing within them, feeding on the tooth's substance until it rotted away. The theory was ancient. It appeared in Sumerian texts thousands of years before the Middle Ages, but it found new life in medieval Europe. When a person felt the stabbing pulse of a rotten tooth, it was easy to imagine something living inside it, eating it from within. The pain came and went like something alive, squirming, biting, and burrowing. The image was horrifying, but it gave shape to the agony. To fight these invisible worms, people turned to equally imaginative cures. Some believed that placing a warm mixture of herbs or oils on the affected tooth would draw the worm out. Others held smoldering herbs near the mouth so that the smoke might drive the creature away. There are even records of healers heating wax and dripping it onto the tooth to trap the worm, then proudly showing a tiny thread-like residue as proof that the parasite had fled. These practices didn't work, of course, but they gave people hope. And hope, in a time without painkillers, was sometimes the strongest medicine of all. Others turned to the church for relief. Since pain was often seen as a trial sent by God or a test of faith, prayer became a remedy as much as any herb. There were saints associated with toothache, Saint Apollonia being the most famous. According to legend, she was a Christian martyr whose teeth were violently pulled out during her persecution. As a result, medieval people prayed to her for protection against tooth pain. Her name was invoked in homes and churches alike, and her image often appeared holding a golden tooth with pincers. For those in agony, Saint Apollonia offered comfort, not through cure, but through faith, a reminder that pain could be endured with divine grace. When faith alone could not ease the suffering, people turned to natural remedies passed down through oral tradition. Herbalists and wise women brewed mixtures from sage, clove, and myrrh, ingredients that, by coincidence or intuition, had mild antiseptic properties. They would recommend holding these herbs in the mouth, chewing them slowly, or rubbing their oils directly on the gums. Salt, too, was a common treatment, used to cleanse the mouth or rubbed into sore spots. Some remedies even included vinegar or urine, both acidic, which may have offered slight relief by cleaning the area and numbing the nerves, though the effect was brief and unpleasant. Despite their lack of scientific understanding, medieval healers were astute observers. They noticed patterns. People who ate too much sweetened wine or honey tended to lose teeth earlier. Those who rinsed with herbs or used cloth to wipe their mouths had fresher breath and less pain. They began to connect cleanliness with comfort. Monastic physicians, who kept detailed notes on ailments, often prescribed herbal rinses or powders for oral discomfort. In manuscripts like the Trotula, a famous collection of medieval medical writings, there are recipes for mouthwashes and pastes meant to strengthen the teeth and sweeten the breath. Though, The ingredients varied, from ground coral and burnt eggshells to mint and vinegar. The goal was the same: to fight decay through balance and purification. Still, for many, the battle was futile. Once decay set in, the only cure was extraction, a terrifying prospect we'll explore later. People feared tooth pain because it seemed endless. It interrupted work, sleep, and prayer. A toothache could drive even the most patient soul to desperation. Some chronic sufferers were said to tie herbs around their necks or sleep with charms under their pillows. There were even amulets carved with strange inscriptions meant to ward off pain, proof that superstition and medicine often walked hand in hand. The way people described their toothaches tells us much about their world. They spoke of teeth weeping or burning, of jaws singing with pain, as if the body itself were crying out. In an age when illness was both physical and spiritual, such language made sense. The tooth was not just an organ. It was a vessel of suffering, a small reminder of human frailty in a world full of uncertainty. A toothache might even be seen as punishment, a test of faith, or a consequence of gluttony. To suffer was to be reminded of mortality. And yet, through it all, people still sought to clean and protect their teeth to avoid the agony of decay. They might not have understood bacteria or plaque, but they understood cause and effect. Dirty mouths led to pain. Clean mouths felt better. This simple truth drove them to experiment with herbs, ashes, and powders, to rinse, rub, and pray for relief. In their own way, medieval people were already practicing preventative care, long before the science of dentistry gave it a name. So before there were dentists or drills, there was belief in worms, in saints, in herbs, and in hope. Every aching tooth told a story not only of pain, but of perseverance. And while we might pity their ignorance today, perhaps we should also admire their endurance. For in the flickering candlelight of a medieval night, when pain throbbed like a heartbeat and remedies ran dry, people still sought comfort in the simplest acts. A sip of wine, a whisper of prayer, and the hope that tomorrow would bring a little less pain. When the morning bells rang across a medieval village, signaling the start of another day, people began their quiet rituals of washing and preparing themselves for work or prayer. Among these routines was one of the most overlooked, the cleaning of the mouth and teeth. Though they didn't have toothbrushes, toothpaste, or even a true understanding of dental hygiene, medieval people developed surprisingly effective ways to keep their teeth clean, fresh, and functional. Their methods may seem primitive today, but for their time, they were both practical and creative. The most common and accessible method was simple: rinsing with water. After waking or after meals, many people would take a sip of clean water, swish it around the mouth, and spit it out. This helped remove bits of food and freshen the breath. It was a habit that came naturally in a world where meals often stuck to the teeth: thick breads, grains, and fibrous vegetables. For peasants and laborers, this might be done at a well or basin, while nobles and monks performed it from carved basins or jugs kept in their chambers. In monasteries, the act of washing, including the mouth, was sometimes done in silence as part of morning devotion, a cleansing of both body and soul before prayer. Beyond rinsing, people used what they called tooth cloths. These were small strips of linen or rough wool dipped in water, salt, vinegar, or even wine, then rubbed gently along the teeth and gums. The rough fabric helped remove buildup, while the liquid, especially if acidic or salty, acted as a mild cleanser. In some recipes preserved in medieval manuscripts, ashes from burnt herbs or bread were mixed into the liquid to add a slight, abrasive effect. Imagine a farmer at dawn dipping a small rag into a wooden cup of salted water, rubbing his teeth clean before heading into the fields. It was humble, effective, and surprisingly similar in principle to modern brushing. For those who could afford more refined care, herbal mixtures came into play. Medieval people believed that nature held cures for every ailment, including oral discomfort. They used sprigs of aromatic herbs such as sage, rosemary, thyme, and mint, which were either chewed, rubbed directly onto the teeth, or soaked in wine or vinegar to create a refreshing rinse. Chewing herbs not only cleaned the teeth, but also stimulated the gums, much like modern mouth fresheners. There are accounts of noble ladies carrying small pouches of mint or cloves to chew after feasts, while travelers and pilgrims tucked dried sage leaves into their satchels to keep their mouths clean on long journeys. Another common tool was the chewing stick, a forerunner to the toothbrush. These were small twigs from certain trees, known for their cleansing properties, such as hazel, willow, or fruit trees. One end of the stick was chewed or softened until it frayed, creating a fibrous brush-like texture. The user would then rub this end against the teeth and gums, cleaning away residue. When the tip wore out, it was simply cut off and chewed again to form a new one. In some parts of Europe, especially where trade routes connected to the Islamic world, travelers may have even encountered the miswak, a traditional tooth-cleaning stick still used today. Though medieval Europeans did not fully adopt it, they shared the same practical idea. Nature's tools were enough. Ashes played an important role as well. Wood ash, especially from herbs like rosemary or juniper, was mixed with salt and rubbed onto the teeth. It acted as a primitive tooth powder, polishing the enamel and neutralizing odors. Though the texture was coarse and the taste unpleasant, the result was a cleaner, smoother mouth. Even soot from hearths or burnt bread was sometimes used, the logic being that if it could scrub pots and pans, perhaps it could scrub teeth too. Of course, some of these abrasives wore down enamel over time, but the immediate effect of cleanliness and freshness made them popular nonetheless. In wealthier households, wine and vinegar became the foundation of early mouthwashes. Both were acidic and believed to kill impurities. People might swirl a mouthful after meals or dip linen into it for wiping. Recipes often added herbs or even honey to soften the flavor. Monastic healers documented such concoctions in their medical texts, suggesting combinations of sage steeped in vinegar for gum health, or wine infused with cloves to sweeten the breath. While the science was crude, many of these mixtures were genuinely antibacterial, offering real though mild protection against decay. Personal cleanliness varied widely across the social spectrum, but the desire to stay fresh was universal. City dwellers, especially merchants and artisans, paid more attention to appearance, since good breath and clean teeth could make a difference in trade or courtship. Peasants, though focused on survival, still kept to small rituals, rinsing at the well, chewing herbs, or using ashes. Monks and nuns, ever mindful of discipline, treated bodily care as part of spiritual order. In all corners of society, the simple act of cleaning the mouth was both a necessity and a quiet comfort. Interestingly, some people combined cleaning with charm or superstition. A few believed that saying a short prayer while washing one's mouth could prevent illness or misfortune. Certain herbs were considered blessed or protective, especially those associated with saints or holy days. Some records even mention speaking water over which prayers were said before using it for washing. This mix of faith and hygiene shows how closely spirituality and daily care were intertwined. And though their methods lacked our modern precision, the intention was timeless. They wanted to feel clean, to taste freshness, to remove the grime of yesterday. They sought comfort in the small ritual of self-care, often performed before the day's labor or night's rest. It was not just about health. It was about dignity, a moment of quiet control in a hard and unpredictable world. So, while they didn't reach for a toothbrush or squeeze a tube of minty paste, medieval people had their own ways of greeting the morning with clean teeth and fresh breath. Their linen cloths, twigs, ashes, and herbs were simple but effective tools in a world where every act of care mattered. In the next chapter, we'll step deeper into this world of strange mixtures and fragrant potions, exploring how medieval, People crafted their very own mouthwashes, some sweet and soothing, others sharp enough to make your eyes water. If you could step into a medieval apothecary, the scent would overwhelm you. The air would be thick with rosemary, mint, vinegar, and wine, all mingled with the sharp tang of metal and smoke. Shelves of glass and earthenware jars lined the walls, filled with powders, roots, dried flowers, and strange liquids. Among the medicines and tonics sat a curious assortment of concoctions, meant not to heal wounds or fevers, but to freshen the breath and clean the mouth, the medieval mouthwashes. They were as varied as the people who made them, ranging from simple herbal waters to potent brews mixed with salt, wine, and sometimes even spells. For most people, mouthwash began as a rinse, not a product of luxury, but of practicality. After a meal of oily meats or thick pottage, a quick rinse with water or ale helped dislodge food and clear the mouth. But those who wanted a little more freshness turned to herbs. A handful of mint leaves soaked in vinegar made a strong cleansing rinse that both tightened the gums and banished odors. Sage was especially popular, often steeped in warm wine or boiled in water before use. Monks recommended rinsing with sage every morning to harden the teeth and strengthen the gums. It was one of the few oral care practices both peasants and nobles shared, though the ingredients differed: cheap vinegar for the poor, rich wine for the elite. Herbal mouthwashes were more than just practical. They carried symbolic meaning. Herbs like rosemary and thyme were associated with purity and protection. To rinse one's mouth with them was to cleanse not only the body, but the spirit. Medieval people believed that foul breath came not only from spoiled food or sickness, but also from spiritual corruption. A sweet mouth symbolized honesty, while foul breath could signify deceit or sin. Thus, cleaning the mouth had moral importance as well as physical purpose. To keep one's breath sweet was, in a way, to keep one's conscience clear. Some of the strangest recipes for mouthwash came from medical texts and household manuals. One from the 14th century recommends boiling vinegar with salt and sage, then adding honey to soothe the humors and sweeten the mouth. Another suggests mixing white wine with powdered coral, burnt alum, and rosewater, an expensive blend reserved for nobility. Coral was thought to strengthen the teeth, alum to purify, and rosewater to perfume. The resulting mixture, gently swished and spat, left the mouth tingling and perfumed. Others used burnt bread or ashes mixed with vinegar, believing that fire purified what it touched. In monasteries, where monks experimented with herbal remedies, records mention rinses made from hyssop, plantain, and fennel, herbs known to reduce swelling and cleanse infection. Though they lacked our understanding of bacteria, many of these ingredients genuinely had antiseptic properties. In some rural villages, mouthwashing crossed into the realm of superstition. People whispered small charms or blessings as they rinsed, believing that invoking the right saint or phrase could drive out sickness or misfortune. Water drawn from a church well, or blessed on a holy day, was thought to have extra cleansing power. A mother might tell her child to rinse while reciting the Lord's Prayer, or to hold a sprig of rosemary between their teeth as protection against tooth spirits. These rituals blurred the line between hygiene and faith, between what we would call self-care and what they saw as divine protection. The wealthy, as always, took things further. In noble courts, mouthwashes became part of elaborate grooming rituals. After banquets heavy with spiced meats, rich sauces, and sweetened wines, nobles would retire to wash their hands and rinse their mouths. Servants brought silver basins and pitchers of rosewater or wine infused with cloves and cinnamon. These ingredients not only freshened the breath, but also displayed wealth, as imported spices were rare and costly. Imagine a lady of the court swirling rose-scented wine in her mouth, then dabbing her lips with a perfumed cloth, an act equal parts hygiene and luxury. To smell pleasant was a mark of refinement, and to have sweet breath was a sign of elegance and care. Yet, not all medieval mouthwashes were pleasant. Some recipes called for ingredients that would make a modern person wince. One 13th century text recommends rinsing with the urine of a boy child mixed with salt to cleanse the mouth and whiten the teeth. Though repulsive today, urine was considered medicinal in medieval times, thought to be sterile and full of purifying qualities. Likewise, vinegar boiled with alum or even crushed oyster shells was used as a powerful cleanser. These strong mixtures likely stripped enamel, but they also killed bacteria and left the mouth feeling fresh, if a bit raw. Beyond herbs and minerals, the sense of ritual mattered deeply. People believed that performing mouth cleansing at the right time, usually in the morning after waking or after eating, balanced the body's humors. It prevented rotting vapors from rising from the stomach and spreading illness through the body. Physicians advised rinsing not too often, however, warning that excessive use of vinegar or salt could dry the humors and weaken the gums. As with all things in medieval life, balance was key. Too little care led to decay, but too much could harm the natural harmony of the body. In the quieter corners of society, in monasteries, cottages, and taverns, mouth-washing was also an act of comfort. Warm herbal rinses soothed tooth pain and gum soreness. Some people would sit by the hearth with a cup of hot sage tea, holding it in their mouths before swallowing, letting the warmth ease the ache. For those who lived with constant discomfort, these small remedies were precious. They couldn't stop decay, but they could make life a little more bearable. So the next time you rinse your mouth with minty mouthwash, imagine instead a cup of warm wine steeped with sage and rosemary, or a basin of rose water and vinegar poured by candlelight. Imagine the flicker of flames dancing on a stone wall as someone whispers a short prayer, swishes the mixture in their mouth, and spits it into the fire, watching the steam rise like incense. Medieval mouthwash wasn't just about cleanliness. It was a small ritual of renewal, a moment of control and grace in a rough, uncertain world. In the next chapter, we'll look at how these rinses were joined by something more familiar, tooth powders and early pastes. Crushed bones, burnt shells, and fragrant herbs formed the foundation of medieval toothpaste, long before mint and fluoride ever existed. If you opened a medieval chest or cupboard in a noble household, you might find small jars or pouches filled with curious powders, white, gray, sometimes even green. These were not cosmetics or medicines, but early forms of what we might recognize as toothpaste. They were called tooth powders, and for those who could afford them, they were the height of personal care. For the poor, simpler versions made from ashes, salt, or crushed herbs served the same purpose. In both cases, the goal was the same as ours today: to clean the teeth, strengthen the gums, and sweeten the breath, though their recipes were far different and sometimes downright alarming. Tooth powders were usually made at home or by apothecaries who mixed and sold them alongside ointments and balms. A basic recipe might include burnt bones or eggshells ground to a fine powder, mixed with a bit of salt and aromatic herbs. The bones provided a gritty texture that polished the teeth, while herbs like sage or mint added freshness. Sometimes, ashes from burnt rosemary, barley, or bread were added for extra abrasiveness. Users would dip a damp linen cloth, a small stick, or even a finger into the mixture, then rub it across their teeth and gums in slow circular motions. Though primitive, the method worked remarkably well at removing buildup and polishing enamel. Among the wealthy, ingredients grew more exotic. Powdered coral, crushed oyster shells, pumice stone, or even powdered gems were used. These were mixed with honey, vinegar, or wine to form a paste. Honey acted as a natural binder and sweetener, though its stickiness made it far from ideal by modern standards. Still, in the absence of commercial toothpaste, it was luxurious. A 14th century English recipe for powder for teeth called for burnt salt, pumice and wine dregs, ground fine and rubbed each morning to make teeth white and strong. Another recipe from Italy recommended burnt stag's horn and powdered marble, mixed with rosewater, both believed to strengthen teeth and purify the breath. The science behind these powders was based more on observation and philosophy than on chemistry. Medieval healers believed that decay and bad breath came from imbalance, from excess moisture, heat, or corruption in the body. Tooth powders, with their drying, abrasive qualities, were thought to restore balance by removing excess moisture and cleaning away corruption. In a way, it echoed the same logic that guided their diets and medicines. Everything had to be kept in equilibrium. Too much wetness softened the gums. Too much dryness made them brittle. Tooth powders were therefore used sparingly, often once or twice a week, or before important gatherings and holy days, when one wished to appear clean and presentable. The act of using tooth powder was also sensory. Imagine the texture of fine ash against the teeth, the taste of sage and salt, the faint burn of vinegar. It wasn't pleasant, but it gave a sense of renewal. For many, the roughness meant it was working, that the teeth were being truly scoured clean. There was satisfaction in that grit, in the way it scraped away the residue of a meal. The smell of herbs like rosemary and mint made the experience slightly more comforting, and the ritual itself, quiet, repetitive, deliberate, could even feel meditative. In a world where life was often chaotic and harsh, the simple act of cleaning one's teeth provided a rare moment of calm. Monastic and medical manuscripts also provide fascinating glimpses into these early recipes. In the Trotula, a medieval medical text from Salerno, there are several formulas for cleaning the teeth and sweetening the mouth. One calls for mixing burnt bread with salt and rubbing it gently on the teeth. Another combines crushed sage leaves with alum and vinegar. Alum, a natural mineral, acted as an astringent, tightening gums and preventing bleeding. Though some of these ingredients could erode enamel over time, they were also mildly disinfecting, making them surprisingly effective for their era. Herbalists often added mint, fennel, or cloves, not only for scent, but for their cooling and soothing effects. For the poor, tooth powders were made from whatever was available. Ashes from the hearth mixed with salt were the most common, sometimes with a pinch of crushed mint or parsley if herbs were on hand. Peasants who couldn't afford such luxuries often skipped the powders altogether, relying instead on rinsing and rubbing with cloth. Yet even in the humblest homes, the desire for cleanliness remained. A peasant woman might rub her teeth with a bit of soot and salt before a festival day or at church service, wanting to feel her best. Clean teeth, even slightly, were part of dignity, and dignity was something everyone valued. Not all recipes were harmless, however. Some contained ingredients we now know to be dangerous: mercury, alum in excess, or vinegar so strong it burned the gums. In pursuit of white teeth, people sometimes went too far. There were accounts of noblewomen using acidic concoctions that left their teeth gleaming and crumbling. Others believed in rubbing teeth with crushed pearls or metal filings, thinking that the strength of the substance would pass into their bodies. These were the extremes of medieval vanity, and though rare, they remind us that the pursuit of beauty, even in the Middle Ages, could be both creative and destructive. Still, for every misguided remedy, there were those that genuinely worked. Powdered charcoal, long used as a cleaner, removed stains and neutralized odors. Sage, still used in natural dental products today, killed bacteria and soothed the gums. Salt helped draw out moisture and fight infection. And perhaps most importantly, the act of cleaning itself, regardless of the ingredients, prevented buildup and disease. The medieval person may not have known the word plaque, but they knew that neglecting the mouth led to pain. Their methods, though imperfect, were guided by a deep, intuitive understanding of cause and effect. Tooth powders became small symbols of civilization, the difference between roughness and refinement, between nature and nurture. To clean one's teeth was to care about presentation, health, and self-respect. It was a way to greet the day or the mirror with readiness. And for all the strangeness of their ingredients, those early powders mark one of the first true steps toward modern oral hygiene. In the next chapter, we'll explore another powerful force that shaped how people cared for their teeth: the church. Was vanity a sin? Could caring too much about appearance be a moral risk? You'll see how religion and cleanliness often collided in surprising ways, revealing the delicate balance between faith, purity, and pride. In the Middle Ages, the church was not only a spiritual authority, it was the moral compass of daily life. Its teachings shaped how people dressed, ate, spoke, and even how they cleaned themselves. Hygiene, including the care of teeth and mouth, existed in a delicate tension between piety and pride. To be clean was virtuous, but to care too much about appearances was to risk vanity, one of the 7 deadly sins. This complex relationship between the church and cleanliness profoundly influenced how people viewed oral care. For some, cleaning their teeth was a sign of discipline and devotion. For others, it flirted dangerously with the sin of self-admiration. Monks and nuns, living under strict religious orders, practiced regular washing, not for vanity, but for purity. Many monasteries followed rules that emphasized personal cleanliness as a reflection of spiritual order. The Benedictine rule, one of the most widespread monastic codes, encouraged moderation in all things, including bodily care. A monk might wash his face and mouth in the morning before prayers, not to look better, but to present himself to God with a clean body and a calm spirit. In these quiet morning rituals, cleansing the mouth was as much an act of reverence as brushing dust from a holy book. Cleanliness was a sign of inner discipline, a small way to honor creation by caring for the vessel that carried the soul. But beyond the monastery walls, attitudes grew more complicated. Preachers warned against vanity and excess, reminding parishioners that earthly beauty was fleeting and that focusing on it led the soul astray. Pamphlets and sermons condemned those who adorned themselves with perfumes, powders, and fine clothes, saying such indulgence fed pride and distracted from God. Women, in particular, were urged to avoid the temptations of appearance, and that included whitening the teeth or sweetening the breath too often. "Let not thy care for the flesh become care for the devil," wrote one medieval preacher, equating beauty rituals with moral danger. And yet, in the same breath, others praised cleanliness as godly, proof that the faithful respected the bodies God had given them. This contradiction reflected a wider struggle within medieval thought. On one hand, cleanliness symbolized purity. Priests washed their hands before Mass. Pilgrims bathed before entering holy sites. And saints were described as radiant, their bodies uncorrupted even in death. On the other hand, indulgence in personal care risked drawing attention away from humility. To polish one's teeth too eagerly, or to scent one's breath too sweetly, could be seen as courting pride. It was not the act of cleaning that was sinful, but the intention behind it. Was one cleaning to be pure before God, or to appear pleasing before others? That question hovered over every act of grooming. Still, the church played an important role in preserving the knowledge of hygiene. Monasteries were centers of learning, where monks copied medical manuscripts and cultivated herbs used in healing. Within their gardens grew sage, mint, rosemary, and fennel, the same plants used in mouthwashes and tooth powders. Monastic infirmaries prepared rinses for sore gums and herbal poultices for aching teeth. In these sacred spaces, medicine and faith intertwined. The monks understood that caring for the body helped maintain the soul's balance. Pain distracted from prayer, and cleanliness aided focus. In this sense, the church became an early guardian of health, even if its priests preached caution against excess. Confession and penance also played their part in how people viewed cleanliness. A person might confess to vanity for admiring their reflection too long, or for spending money on imported perfumes or powders. Some confessors considered tooth cleaning harmless. Others saw it as a luxury bordering on sin. Manuals for confessors even listed questions like, "Hast thou adorned thyself beyond reason?" And "Hast thou sought to draw attention by sweet scents or polished appearance?" Those questions, subtle as they were, shaped medieval attitudes toward beauty. A person could clean their teeth out of necessity, to prevent foulness, but to do so for admiration's sake was spiritually suspect. Yet, human nature is persistent. Despite the Church's warnings, people continued to care about how they looked and smelled. The nobility, attending court and banquets, valued fresh breath and bright smiles. Pilgrims and travelers cleaned themselves before entering cities or shrines. Lovers exchanged scented herbs as tokens of affection. The line between godliness and vanity blurred, and most people simply sought balance. A clean mouth, after all, was not only pleasant but respectful, both to others and to oneself. Interestingly, some religious texts use the metaphor of teeth to describe spiritual strength. The Song of Solomon compares teeth to a flock of shorn sheep, pure and even, a symbol of order and beauty. Medieval theologians interpreted such passages as allegories for virtue, each tooth representing a good deed or a moral truth. The mouth, in this symbolism, was the vessel of the word, sacred speech, prayer, confession. Keeping it clean had spiritual weight. Dirty or decaying teeth could thus be seen as signs of moral decay, reminders to cleanse not only the body but the soul. In monasteries, oral care became part of quiet routine. The sound of water being poured from a jug, the faint scent of sage rising in the cool morning air, these were small, sacred moments of mindfulness. A monk might rinse his mouth and whisper a prayer of gratitude, or a nun might chew mint leaves while tending the garden, feeling the freshness spread through her breath as she sang softly under her hood. Cleanliness, in such moments, was not indulgent but peaceful. It was order in a world often ruled by chaos. By the later Middle Ages, as trade expanded and luxury goods became more accessible, the Church's stance softened slightly. Moderation remained the guiding virtue. Beauty was not evil, provided it did not rule the heart. A clean body, a pleasant scent, even polished teeth. These were not sins if done with humility and care. "God loves cleanliness," wrote one medieval theologian, "for it reflects the harmony of his creation." Thus, the same rituals once seen as dangerous could, in the right spirit, become expressions of reverence. So while vanity may have been frowned upon, the Church helped preserve the very knowledge that allowed people to stay clean. It nurtured the herbal traditions, the medical texts, and the gentle rituals that formed the foundation of medieval hygiene. In the flickering light of monasteries, where prayer met practice, the idea of caring for one's mouth became something more than vanity. It became devotion. In the next chapter, we'll step away from the cloisters and into the glittering halls of the wealthy, where dental care was as much about display as it was about health. There, among silver basins and perfumed herbs, we'll see how the medieval elite kept their smiles bright in a world obsessed with status, scent, and style. To walk through the chambers of a wealthy medieval household was to enter a world of comfort and ornament far removed from the muddy streets outside. Here, the air smelled faintly of rosewater and beeswax. Basins of polished brass sat beside mirrors of burnished metal. Servants carried pitchers of scented water for washing hands and faces. And among these rituals of refinement was the care of the mouth and teeth, an intimate luxury that marked status as much as jewelry or silk. For the nobility, cleanliness was a reflection of power. To look healthy and well-groomed showed control over one's life, one's body, and one's household. It distinguished the elite from the laboring poor, whose hands were rough and whose teeth bore the scars of hard bread and smoke. A nobleman's smile, even if imperfect, had to appear cared for. A lady's breath, sweetened with herbs and wine, became part of her grace. Oral care was no mere chore. It was a statement of refinement and discipline, an art woven into the rhythms of noble life. The wealthy had access to ingredients and materials unavailable to commoners. Their tooth powders were blended with imported spices, cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, and mixed with fine abrasives like crushed pearls, pumice, or coral. These ingredients were costly, traded along routes that stretched from Venice to Alexandria, and their use in tooth care symbolized sophistication. Apothecaries in major cities prepared customized mixtures for noble clients, sealed in small boxes or silver jars engraved with family crests. Using these powders wasn't only about cleanliness, it was a mark of prestige. Each morning, after washing and prayer, a noble might perform a ritual of grooming that included tending the teeth. Servants brought bowls of warm water infused with mint or rose petals. A soft linen cloth, perhaps embroidered at the edges, would be dipped into the water and wrung out. The nobleman or lady would then wipe the teeth and gums gently, rubbing in circles as instructed by the household physician or apothecary. Afterwards, they might rinse with wine mixed with herbs, sometimes sage, sometimes rosemary, believed to strengthen the gums and sweeten the mouth. The sensation was likely both, refreshing and slightly intoxicating, a daily indulgence that made one feel clean and powerful. Wealth also brought knowledge. Many noble households employed physicians or learned clerics who read medical texts from across Europe and the Islamic world. Through them, the upper class had access to advanced herbal remedies and imported substances. Texts like those from the Salerno school in Italy, one of the most famous centers of medieval medicine, advised using sage, salt, and vinegar for mouth rinses, or rubbing the gums with powdered coral to strengthen them. These recommendations spread quickly among the literate elite, passed from physician to patron and from patron to peers. Clean teeth became a subtle mark of education, a sign that one followed the wisdom of scholars, not the habits of the unlearned. The wealthy also dined differently, and that affected their oral care. Their feasts were rich with meats, sauces, and sweet confections made with honey and increasingly sugar. Sugar, though rare, became a fashionable ingredient in the later Middle Ages. Imported from the East at great expense, it appeared in pastries, candied fruits, and wine syrups. But with it came a silent cost: tooth decay. The same nobles who flaunted their sweetened delicacies were also the first to suffer from cavities. Chronic tooth pain became a common affliction among the upper class. This irony was not lost on medieval physicians, who warned of tooth forms, feasting on the sweetness of luxury. Still, indulgence prevailed. To counteract the damage, nobles doubled their efforts at cleaning, using harsher abrasives and stronger rinses, sometimes to the detriment of their enamel. In courtly culture, breath mattered as much as appearance. Banquets were social performances, with conversation, laughter, and flirtation flowing as freely as wine. The scent of one's breath could leave a lasting impression, pleasant or otherwise. To ensure freshness, nobles chewed herbs, cloves, or cardamom after meals. Some carried small pouches filled with perfumed powders or dried herbs, tucked discreetly in sleeves or belts. A quick chew or a sip of rose water could mask the aftertaste of garlic or wine before an audience with a king or a lover. Breath, like perfume, became part of the language of courtship. There was also a spiritual aspect to noble hygiene. Cleanliness symbolized moral order and divine favor. Kings and queens were considered chosen by God, and their bodies were seen as extensions of their sacred authority. Chronicles and romances often described noble heroes and heroines as shining, pure, and beautiful, with teeth like pearls and lips like coral. The maintenance of that image wasn't only vanity. It was duty. To look divine was to act divine. To neglect one's body, by contrast, hinted at inner decay. Among royal courts, the ritual of cleanliness could become almost theatrical. Servants known as valets de chambre attended to the personal grooming of kings and nobles, bringing perfumes, cloves, and even early forms of toothpicks made from precious metals or ivory. The toothpick, simple yet refined, became a symbol of elegance. Using one discreetly after a meal was seen as good manners, a sign of civility. Some were even worn as ornaments, fine gold or silver toothpicks dangling from chains, both practical and decorative. A noble might gently clean between teeth while engaged in conversation, a small gesture of refinement in a world where etiquette was everything. Women of high status took particular care with their appearance, and teeth were part of their beauty regimen. Manuals of courtly behavior advised ladies to keep the mouth sweet and modest, and to avoid foods that caused foul breath or swollen gums. They rinsed with rosewater and chewed anise seeds or candied fennel to perfume the breath. In some Italian courts, powdered pearls were mixed into pastes not only for whitening the teeth, but for lightening the lips, a costly but fashionable trend. Though these practices seem extravagant, they were rooted in the same desire as today, to look and feel fresh, attractive, and worthy of admiration. Despite the luxuries, tooth pain haunted even the highest ranks. Diaries and letters from the medieval elite mention aching molars, swollen gums, and sleepless nights. When cleaning failed, they summoned physicians or barber surgeons to pull the offending tooth, an ordeal endured without anesthesia. The scream of a nobleman in a velvet chair, clutching the arms as a surgeon yanked with iron pliers, was a reminder that pain respected no class. Wealth could ease discomfort, but it could not escape it. Still, the noble pursuit of beauty left its mark on history. Their habits, from herbal rinses to tooth powders, helped refine the art of oral care. The ingredients they imported, the recipes they funded, and the manuscripts they commissioned all contributed to a growing culture of hygiene. What began as luxury would, over centuries, filter down to common households. The noble obsession with appearance, criticized by preachers but admired by poets, ultimately helped preserve and spread knowledge about how to care for the body and the teeth. In the next chapter, we'll leave the polished halls of the rich and step into the muddy fields of the countryside, where peasants lived hard, simple lives. There, oral care looked very different, shaped not by luxury, but by survival, resourcefulness, and the humble wisdom of daily labor. In the countryside, far from the stone walls and silver mirrors of noble houses, life moved to the rhythm of the seasons. The people who worked the land, the farmers, shepherds, and laborers, lived lives of hardship, simplicity, and endurance. Their hands were rough, their clothes plain, and their homes often shared space with animals. Yet even in this rugged world, the care of one's body, including the mouth and teeth, was not forgotten. The peasant's approach to hygiene was shaped by necessity, resourcefulness, and the wisdom passed quietly from one generation to the next. Unlike the nobility, peasants had no apothecaries to mix powders or servants to pour rosewater. Their tools for cleanliness came from the earth itself: water from the village well, ashes from the hearth, herbs from the garden. These were the ingredients of their hygiene. Tooth cleaning, though simple, was part of daily life for those who could spare the time. A peasant might rinse his mouth in the morning after breaking his fast, swishing cold water to remove the taste of sleep or the remnants of bread. Some rubbed their teeth with a finger dipped in salt or soot, feeling the roughness scrape away whatever the night had left behind. The diet of peasants, though monotonous, played a surprising role in preserving their teeth. Their meals were mostly bread, porridge, onions, leeks, and cabbages, with meat only on special occasions. They drank weak ale and rarely tasted sugar. This low-sugar diet meant they suffered less from cavities than the wealthy, though their teeth often wore down from grit in their coarse bread. Without flour sifters or fine mills, tiny bits of stone and sand often mixed into their loaves, slowly grinding away enamel with each bite. Over years, teeth flattened, but they did not always decay. Archaeologists studying medieval skeletons often find peasant teeth well preserved, though worn, a testament to a hard but balanced diet. Still, tooth pain was common. When it came, a peasant's remedies were simple and improvised. A hot cloth pressed to the jaw might ease an ache, or a mouthful of ale held against the tooth for a few moments. Herbs like sage, mint, or chamomile, when available, were chewed to soothe pain and freshen the mouth. Some might burn a small twig, blow out the flame, and use the warm ash to rub on the sore spot, believing heat and fire could drive away the pain. These remedies came from folk tradition rather than learned medicine, but they often offered real relief. The countryside was full of knowledge, born of experience rather than books, and much of it, though unrecorded, worked in its own quiet way. Peasant women were the keepers of much of this knowledge. They tended herb gardens beside their cottages, growing mint, sage, thyme, and parsley, not only for flavoring food, but for medicine. A mother might tell her daughter to chew sage to keep the mouth sweet, or to rinse with salt water after a meal. Herbal lore passed down through stories, songs, and habits, forming a living library of care. In some villages, older women, known as wise wives or cunning women, were sought for advice on all manner of ailments, from childbirth to toothache. They prepared herbal poultices, salves, and rinses, the medieval countryside's version of a pharmacy. In communities where money was scarce, hygiene was often communal. Wells, streams, and washing basins were shared spaces where people not only cleaned their clothes, but sometimes rinsed their mouths and faces. Children learned by watching their elders. At dawn, before work, it was common to wash hands and face, and though not everyone took the time to clean their teeth, many did something. A quick rinse, a chew of herbs, or a rub with cloth. Cleanliness wasn't about beauty. It was about comfort, freshness, and routine. It was a small act of care in a life where few comforts existed. Superstition also touched rural hygiene. Some villagers believed that toothache came from small spirits or worms living inside the tooth, a belief shared across Europe. To drive them out, people whispered charms or recited rhymes while cleaning their mouths. In one recorded charm from England, the sufferer would hold a mixture of vinegar and salt in the mouth while saying, "Worm, worm, I conjure thee, by Christ's hand, come out of me." Whether or not it worked, the ritual itself provided comfort, a sense of action against the invisible. Others tied herbs around their necks or wore small crosses made of wood for protection against pain. The environment itself shaped peasant cleanliness. Bathing was rare, especially in winter, but rinsing with water was frequent. Rivers and wells were gathering places not only for work, but for washing. During festivals or holy days, people cleaned themselves more thoroughly face, hands, and teeth alike, as a sign of respect before entering the church. On such days, the smell of herbs filled the air as villagers chewed mint or anise to sweeten their breath. It was part of presenting oneself with dignity, even in threadbare clothes. The tools peasants used were simple yet effective. Chewing sticks made from willow or fruit wood were common, cut freshly from the hedgerow and chewed until the end frayed like a small brush. These sticks helped clean between teeth and strengthened the gums. Some villagers preferred to rub their teeth with a rough cloth dipped in ashes, while others simply used their fingers. Salt, often coarse and plentiful, served as the main cleaning agent. Its abrasiveness cleaned the teeth, and its dryness kept the mouth fresh. Even without mirrors, people could feel the difference. The smoothness after cleaning, the relief of freshness. What peasants lacked in luxury, they made up for in resourcefulness. Their oral care, though humble, was deeply connected to the rhythms of daily life. Cleaning was not a separate ritual, but a part of living, done while drawing water, tending fires, or preparing meals. It was woven into the fabric of existence, a natural act rather than a conscious display. For them, Caring for their teeth was not about beauty or status, but about endurance, the quiet fight to stay healthy and strong in a world that asked much and gave little. And yet, even among the poorest, there was pride. A bright smile, a clean face, a pleasant breath. These were small marks of self-respect. A peasant might not have pearls or perfume, but they could still greet the world clean. In that sense, their simple routines carried a dignity that no gold could buy. In the next chapter, we'll enter a very different world, that of the barber-surgeon, where oral care met the edge of a blade. There, among tools of iron and the smell of blood and vinegar, we'll see how medicine, superstition, and courage came together in the grim art of medieval dental treatment. If you lived in the Middle Ages and had a toothache that no herb, prayer, or rinse could cure, there was only one person left to turn to, the barber-surgeon. Half healer, half craftsman, the barber-surgeon occupied a strange space between medicine and manual labor. His red and white pole, a symbol that still survives today, represented the bandages and blood of his trade. He cut hair, trimmed beards, opened veins, and when necessary, pulled teeth. In a time before professional dentistry, these men were the guardians of the mouth, though their cures were often as painful as the diseases they treated. The origins of the barber-surgeon lay in practicality. Monks, who had once practiced medicine, were forbidden by church law from spilling blood after the 12th century. The task of surgery, therefore, fell to barbers, who already handled razors and knives with skill. Over time, their responsibilities grew. Bloodletting, lancing abscesses, setting bones, and of course, extracting teeth. It was a grim but necessary profession, born of experience rather than formal study. A barber-surgeon learned by doing, by watching others, and by enduring the shouts and curses of his patients. A visit to a barber-surgeon was an event few forgot. Imagine a small, dimly lit shop on a narrow street. The smell of metal and vinegar hung in the air. A wooden chair stood in the center, its arms worn smooth by desperate hands. Tools, iron pliers, hooks, and chisels lay arranged on a table beside a small basin of water. There were no numbing agents, no anesthesia, no sterile gloves. The patient sat trembling as the barber inspected the offending tooth, perhaps tapping it gently with a metal rod to find the source of pain. When the decision was made, there was no ceremony, only action. To ease the fear, the barber might offer a mouthful of wine or ale. Some used herbal concoctions to dull the senses: poppy, henbane, or mandrake, plants known for their narcotic effects. But more often, the only comfort was speed. The barber gripped the tooth with iron pliers, twisted hard, and pulled. The sound was sickening, the pain unbearable, and the bleeding immediate. Sometimes the tooth came out whole. Sometimes it shattered, leaving fragments behind. The barber would pack the wound with wool soaked in vinegar or wine and press a cloth against the jaw to stop the bleeding. The patient, pale and shaking, was sent home to rest, often grateful simply to be rid of the agony. For all its brutality, this method often worked. In an age without antibiotics, extraction was the surest way to stop infection from spreading. And though barber surgeons were feared, they were also respected. Their skill could save lives. Villagers called upon them not only for teeth, but for every manner of injury and illness. Their shops were part of the fabric of medieval towns, places where pain and healing mingled in equal measure. The same hands that trimmed a noble's beard might, later that day, pull a farmer's molar or stitch a soldier's wound. Some barber surgeons took pride in their craft and sought to improve it. They studied anatomy from the few available texts or from observation on the battlefield, where wounds provided grim lessons. They learned which herbs could reduce swelling or numb pain, and which techniques caused the least bleeding. A skilled barber might even decorate his shop with jars of herbs, bottles of vinegar, and clean linens to suggest order and knowledge. Still, The line between healer and butcher was thin, and outcomes varied wildly, depending on the practitioner's skill and luck. In larger towns and cities, barber surgeons organized into guilds, setting standards for training and practice. They distinguished themselves from simple barbers by the color of their robes or signs on their doors. Some even worked alongside physicians, performing manual operations while doctors prescribed medicines and prayers. Together, they formed the rough beginnings of what would one day become modern medicine. But in the countryside, most barber surgeons were itinerant, traveling from village to village with a small chest of tools and a banner that announced their trade. Their arrival was both dreaded and welcomed, a promise of relief and a reminder of pain. Despite their crude methods, barber surgeons understood certain truths about hygiene. They cleaned their instruments with wine or vinegar, both of which have antiseptic properties. They burned claws after bloody operations and washed their hands before touching wounds. These habits were not scientific, but practical, learned through observation. They noticed that patients who were treated with cleanliness fared better than those who were not. In this way, trial and error slowly built the foundation for future medicine. The barber surgeon's reputation, however, was mixed. Some saw him as a necessary evil, a man who brought relief through suffering. Others saw him as a figure of horror, a toothbreaker who thrived on pain. Medieval artwork sometimes depicted tooth-pulling scenes as grotesque or comical, with patients screaming and onlookers laughing. Traveling entertainers even mocked the process in public squares, pulling teeth on stage as a form of showmanship. It was as much spectacle as surgery, a dark reminder of how closely entertainment and suffering could intertwine in medieval life. For the patients, the memory lingered. A missing tooth was a badge of survival, a small victory over relentless pain. Many who endured it swore never to return, instead seeking herbal remedies or prayers the next time. Others, desperate for relief, went back again and again. For the poor, the barber surgeon was the only hope. For the rich, he was a last resort. But in every case, his role was vital. Without him, countless people would have lived and died in unending agony. In some ways, the barber surgeon embodied the medieval spirit, practical, brave, and unflinching before the harshness of life. His tools were crude, his methods rough, but his intent was often kind. In his small, smoky workshop, amid the clatter of metal and the scent of wine, he practiced the ancient art of healing through endurance. It was not science yet, but it was the beginning of it, the first steps toward understanding that pain could be managed, that disease could be treated, and that the human body, even in its frailty, could be mended by human hands. In the next chapter, we'll all look more closely at the ordeal itself, at the experience of tooth extraction in a world without anesthesia. From herbs and prayers to desperate courage, we'll uncover how people faced one of the most feared medical procedures of the Middle Ages. Few experiences in the Middle Ages inspired as much fear as having a tooth pulled. In an era without anesthesia, antibiotics, or sterile instruments, tooth extraction was a test of courage, a brutal, unforgettable ordeal that blended pain, faith, and desperation. For many, it was the last resort, undertaken only when every other remedy had failed. Yet even amid the horror, there was ritual, bravery, and a strange kind of trust in both human hands and divine will. When the pain of a rotting tooth grew unbearable, when the gums swelled and throbbed and sleep became impossible, the sufferer would seek help. Perhaps it began as a dull ache that spread to the jaw, then to the ear, until it felt as if the entire head pulsed with agony. The afflicted might first turn to a wise woman or herbalist, who would prescribe rinses of vinegar and sage, or poultices of mint and salt to draw out the pain. When that failed, prayers were whispered to Saint Apollonia, the patron saint of toothache, her name invoked over aching jaws and feverish nights. But when all hope of relief was gone, there remained only one option, the extraction. The setting varied depending on wealth and location. A noble might endure the ordeal in his private chamber, with servants and physicians attending. A peasant might face it in a smoky workshop, seated on a wooden stool. In both cases, the fear was the same. The patient would be told to hold still, to bite down on a piece of leather or cloth, and to pray. Sometimes they were offered a cup of strong wine or ale to numb the senses. A few rare healers prepared herbal draughts from opium poppies or henbane, plants known for their sedative properties, but these were unpredictable, sometimes calming, sometimes deadly. More often, courage was the only anesthesia. The barber surgeon approached with his tools, iron forceps, pincers, or a small hooked instrument called a pelican, named for its curved beak-like shape. He examined the tooth, tapping it to find its looseness, and positioned the tool at the base. The first movement was a twist, sharp, deliberate, meant to break the roots free. If the tooth resisted, he twisted again, harder, sometimes rocking the tool side to side. The sound was a sickening crack. Then came the pull, strong and quick, tearing the tooth from its socket with a spray of blood. The pain was blinding, the kind that stopped thought and turned breath into a scream. Some fainted. Others bit through the cloth in their mouths. For a few moments, the world narrowed to nothing but fire and sound. When it was done, the barber surgeon held up the tooth like a trophy, sometimes showing it to the patient as proof that the source of pain was gone. He wiped his tools with wine or vinegar and packed the empty socket with wool soaked in the same. The bleeding slowed, the pain dulled to a throb, and the patient, dizzy and trembling, was offered a drink or a prayer. In towns, the extracted teeth were sometimes thrown into the fire, a symbolic gesture meant to destroy the toothworm once and for all. In villages, they might be buried near crossroads to keep the pain from returning. Even in medicine, superstition lingered close. Though the ordeal sounds barbaric, there was logic behind it. An infected tooth could become deadly, spreading infection through the body. Extraction, however brutal, often saved lives. And not all extractions ended in disaster. Skilled barber surgeons learned techniques to minimize damage, twisting rather than yanking, cleaning the wound to prevent rot. Over time, their experience formed the foundation of surgical practice, the understanding that pain, though inevitable, could be managed through speed and precision. Some healers, especially women known for their herbal knowledge, tried gentler methods to ease the suffering. They used poultices made from willow bark, nature's source of salicylic acid, the ancestor of aspirin or clove oil, which numbed pain. Others prepared mixtures of vinegar and ground myrrh, applied to the gums to soothe inflammation. There were even tooth charms, small written prayers or verses worn around the neck or tucked under the pillow, believed to keep pain away. In every village, someone knew a phrase, a herb, or a ritual that might help. It was a collective fight against agony, born from generations of trial and error. After an extraction, recovery was slow. The wound bled for hours, sometimes days. Without modern sterilization, infection was a constant threat. A patient might rinse with wine, vinegar, or salt water to keep the mouth clean. Some chewed herbs like sage or thyme to promote healing. The pain lingered, but so did relief, a blessed silence where the throbbing had once been. People spoke of it in reverent tones. The night after the tooth was gone, when they could finally sleep again. The suffering was immense, but so was the gratitude. Tooth extraction also carried social meaning. In a time when many lost teeth early, missing teeth became marks of experience, even of endurance. A gap in a smile told a story of hardship, of courage, of survival. For the poor, it was proof of endurance. For the rich, it was a reminder that even wealth could not buy immunity from pain. The shared memory of extraction, the fear, the scream, the sigh of relief, was something everyone, from peasant to noble, could understand. It was a rare equality in a world divided by class. Interestingly, some medieval people kept their extracted teeth as talismans. It was believed that carrying one's own tooth could prevent future pain, or that burying it properly would ensure new, healthy ones in heaven. Others gave the tooth to a child or relative to bring good luck, or burned it while saying a prayer to Saint Apollonia. Even in suffering, the tooth held meaning, a small, tangible symbol of the body's mysterious connection to the soul. The courage it took to face such pain cannot be overstated. There was no numbing, no comfort, but faith and will. People endured because they had to, because the ache left no other choice. It is easy, from our modern comfort, to see them as primitive, but perhaps they were also incredibly strong. Their strength lay not only in their bodies, but in their spirit, the quiet acceptance that pain was part of life, and that life went on. In the next chapter, we'll turn to a problem even the bravest face daily: bad breath. From sweet herbs to strange charms, we'll discover how medieval people fought the invisible foe that haunted every meal and conversation: the battle against foul breath. Of all the quiet struggles of medieval life, few were as personal or as embarrassing as bad breath. Known then as foul breath or evil vapor, it was a problem that crossed every social boundary. A peasant working in the fields, a merchant in the marketplace, even a noble at court could suffer from it. Without modern toothpaste or mouthwash, keeping one's breath fresh was a constant effort. And though people didn't fully understand bacteria or oral decay, they knew one simple truth: bad breath could drive others away. In a world built on community, trade, and faith, that was no small problem. The causes of foul breath were a mystery to most. Physicians of the Middle Ages believed it arose from imbalance within the body, the corruption of one of the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, or black bile. A hot, moist temperament, they said, produced foul vapors that rose from the stomach or lungs into the mouth. Others thought bad breath came from the teeth or gums themselves, from rot, tooth wounds, or infection. The humors explained everything in their world, and so even breath became a matter of balance. To cure it, one had to cool the body, cleanse the mouth, or purify the stomach. In practice, this meant a mix of herbs, rituals, and sheer determination. For the poor, remedies were simple and rooted in nature. They chewed fresh herbs like parsley, mint, or sage after meals, especially after eating fish, onions, or garlic. These plants grew in nearly every cottage garden, and their strong scents masked unpleasant odors while stimulating saliva, which naturally cleaned the mouth. Some villagers carried small sprigs of mint or thyme tucked behind the ear or in a pocket, ready to chew when speaking to others. It wasn't only practical, it was polite. Offering a friend a leaf of mint before a conversation was a quiet courtesy, much like offering gum today. Among the wealthy, the approach was more elaborate. After banquets filled with meat, wine, and heavy sauces, nobles rinsed their mouths with mixtures of wine infused with herbs and spices. A typical breath sweetener might include cloves, cinnamon, and anise, boiled in wine and cooled before use. Some recipes even added honey and rosewater to enhance both the flavor and the scent. The result was a luxurious rinse that left the mouth fragrant and the gums tingling. At court, this became part of etiquette. After dining, guests were offered perfumed waters to cleanse their hands and mouths before leaving the table. Fresh breath wasn't just a comfort, it was a mark of refinement. In monasteries, monks took a simpler route. They followed a diet free of excess and often avoided foods that caused strong odors. Fasting, moderation, and herbal teas kept their breath naturally mild. When needed, they rinsed with sage water or chewed on anise seeds, which were known to aid digestion and cool the stomach. In many ways, the monastic lifestyle, regular washing, clean water, and herb cultivation gave them better oral hygiene than much of the population. Silence, too, helped. One who spoke little gave fewer opportunities for bad breath to offend. Medical texts of the time offered dozens of recipes for breath remedies, many combining science, superstition, and poetry. A 13th century English manuscript recommends boiling wine with cinnamon and chewing on the remaining bark to sweeten the humors and calm the stomach. Another suggests grinding cardamom with fennel and sugar and letting it dissolve slowly in the mouth, perhaps one of the earliest forms of a breath mint. Physicians also advised avoiding certain foods thought to heat the body, such as onions, leeks, and heavy meats. Instead, they prescribed cooling foods, apples, pears, and fresh herbs to balance the internal heat believed to cause foul vapors. Faith, as always, intertwined with medicine. Some people believed that bad breath was not merely a physical problem, but a moral one, a sign of sin or corruption of the soul. Sermons occasionally spoke of the stench of wickedness, likening spiritual decay to foul breath. In this context, cleaning the mouth became symbolic, a purification of both body and spirit. To pray while rinsing the mouth, or to use blessed herbs gathered on a holy day, was to cleanse oneself before God. This dual view, hygiene as both practical and spiritual, made even the act of chewing herbs feel sacred. Superstitions offered their own strange remedies. Some believed that carrying a piece of dried rosemary in one's shoe could keep the breath sweet all day. Others wore small amulets inscribed with Latin prayers against evil vapors. In rural villages, people burned sage or juniper in the hearth, breathing in the smoke to purify the lungs. There were even charms written on parchment, tiny prayers folded and worn close to the chest that promised to ward off bad odors of both body and soul. Whether or not they worked, these rituals brought comfort, and in the absence of true medicine, comfort mattered. Of course, there were also less pleasant methods. Some folk healers recommended rinsing with vinegar mixed with salt or alum, substances that stung the mouth but killed bacteria. Others suggested washing with urine, believed to have cleansing properties, or chewing bitter herbs like wormwood to burn away corruption. These harsh treatments may have offered temporary relief, but they often irritated the gums and teeth, causing more harm than good. Still, to the medieval mind, the sting of pain was proof of purification. If it burns, it heals, people would say, trusting sensation over science. In towns and cities, where people lived close together, breath became a social concern. Markets, inns, and churches brought strangers into close quarters, and foul breath could be as offensive as unwashed clothes. Some merchants carried small pouches of spices, both for trade and for personal use. In a crowded tavern or during confession, a quick chew of clove or fennel could make all the difference. It wasn't vanity, it was social survival. Even poets took note. In love songs and courtly tales, a lady's sweet breath was a symbol of purity and desire, while foul breath was used as an insult, a mark of ugliness and moral decay. The connection between the mouth and morality ran deep. The mouth was the gateway of both speech and sustenance, the means by which people praised God, confessed sins, and took communion. To keep it clean was not merely hygiene. It was reverence. Some religious scholars even wrote that a foul mouth reflected a foul heart, while a sweet mouth was the mark of a virtuous soul. Thus, caring for one's breath became an act of devotion as much as decorum. Despite the lack of modern understanding, many of their natural remedies were surprisingly effective. Mint, sage, and parsley remain staples in mouth fresheners today. Clove and cinnamon have antibacterial properties, and vinegar cleanses the mouth, much like modern antiseptics. In their quest for sweet breath, medieval people discovered, through observation and necessity, some of the same truths we live by now, that cleanliness brings comfort, that nature provides cures, and that caring for the mouth is part of caring for the self. As we move forward, we'll explore how these beliefs connected to a broader understanding of the human body. In the next chapter, we'll step into the world of medieval medicine, the theory of the four humors, where every ache and odor, including those of the mouth, was explained through the delicate balance of earth, air, fire, and water within the body. In the medieval world, every aspect of the human body, from the color of the skin to the ache of a tooth, was believed to be governed by a delicate balance of forces. This philosophy, known as the theory of the four humors, shaped medicine, diet, and even the way people cared for their teeth and breath. Long before anyone understood germs or infection, physicians saw the body as a miniature universe, ruled by harmony between four vital fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. When these humors were in balance, a person was healthy and strong. When they fell into disorder, sickness followed, and that sickness could show itself anywhere, even in the mouth. The theory dated back to the ancient Greeks, especially Hippocrates and Galen, whose writings formed the foundation of medieval medical thought. Monks, scholars, and healers across Europe copied and taught these texts for centuries. They believed that every person was born with a natural temperament based on the humors: sanguine, warm and moist, dominated by blood; phlegmatic, cold and moist, ruled by phlegm; choleric, warm and dry, marked by yellow bile; or melancholic, cold and dry, influenced by black bile. Health meant keeping these qualities in equilibrium through diet, behavior, and environment. Toothache, bad breath, and gum disease were all interpreted through this lens of balance and imbalance. If the gums were swollen or the breath foul, a physician might say the body had too much heat, that bile or blood had risen to the head. If the teeth were loose or the mouth dry, it was a sign of excess dryness, a lack of vital moisture. Remedies, therefore, aimed not only at the mouth itself, but at restoring harmony within the entire body. Patients were told to adjust their diets, avoid hot foods like garlic and onions, or eat cooling ones like cucumbers and apples. In some cases, bloodletting was prescribed to release the excess heat believed to cause pain in the jaws. Even a simple toothache might be treated with a carefully planned change in lifestyle: more rest, less wine, and frequent rinsing with sage water to cool the humors. This belief connected oral care to the rhythms of daily life. The medieval person saw no separation between mouth and body, or between health and morality. A balanced diet, regular cleansing, and moderation in pleasure were not only ways to prevent illness, but also ways to stay virtuous. To eat too much sweet food, for instance, was to indulge in gluttony, a moral failing as much as a physical one. The decay that followed was seen as punishment, a visible sign of inner disorder. Likewise, foul breath was a reflection of imbalance, both in the body and in the spirit. To cleanse the mouth was to restore order, to bring the microcosm of the self back into harmony with God's creation. The humoral system also influenced what people believed about aging. As one grew older, the body was thought to dry out and grow colder, leading to weaker teeth and gums. The elderly were advised to eat moist, nourishing foods, soups, porridges, and soft fruits, and to rinse their mouths with warm wine or honey water to restore lost warmth. Aged people who suffered from tooth loss or pain were sometimes described as having too much melancholy, the dark, cold humor associated with decay and sadness. Monastic healers often prescribed cheerful company, gentle exercise, and herbal tonics to balance the spirit as well as the body. Interestingly, the humors also explained personality. A person with strong, healthy teeth and a bright smile might be described as sanguine, cheerful, generous, and full of life. Someone prone to toothaches, however, might be seen as melancholic or phlegmatic, too cold or too moist within. These associations reveal how deeply intertwined health, appearance, and temperament were in medieval thinking. To keep one's mouth clean was not just to maintain hygiene. It was to nurture one's very character, to keep the inner self aligned with nature's harmony. Monastic physicians, who were among the few literate healers of the time, recorded detailed notes about these connections. Their manuscripts contain not only recipes for mouth rinses and tooth powders, but also careful instructions on maintaining balance. One text advises, "Let the man who suffers from ache of the tooth not drink cold wine nor eat raw fruits, for these cool the stomach too much and breed corruption." Another recommends chewing sage leaves daily to strengthen the gums and restore heat to the chew head. Such advice was both spiritual and practical, rooted in centuries of observation, and though mistaken in theory, it often produced results that genuinely eased suffering. The seasons, too, played their role in this harmony. Each season corresponded to certain humors. Spring was the season of blood, summer of yellow bile, autumn of black bile, and winter of phlegm. The wise person adjusted their habits accordingly. In summer, when heat and dryness prevailed, one was to avoid spicy or salty foods that might inflame the gums. In winter, one should keep the mouth moist with warm teas and stews. These seasonal adjustments formed part of everyday wisdom, a way to live in tune with the natural world. And yet, for all its complexity, the humoral theory was not without kindness. It viewed illness not as punishment, but as imbalance, something that could be corrected through care, patience, and moderation. It encouraged people to listen to their bodies, to seek balance in all things. Though the logic was flawed, the underlying philosophy held truth, that health depended on harmony, not excess. That same wisdom guided how people brushed their teeth, what they ate, and how they lived. Cleanliness, both physical and spiritual, was simply a form of balance made visible. To a medieval person, therefore, a healthy mouth meant more than fresh breath or white teeth. It meant that the body's humors were at peace, that one's inner fire, air, water, and earth were in harmony. It meant the self was aligned with creation, the spirit calm, the conscience clear. In this way, even the act of rinsing the mouth or chewing herbs became part of a larger, cosmic rhythm, one that connected the individual to the order of the universe. In the next chapter, we'll look more closely at the plants and herbs that made this balance possible. From sage and mint to rosemary and myrrh, we'll explore the green world of medieval healing, the gardens, monks, and wise, women who tended nature as pharmacy and used it to keep smiles clean and pain at bay. Across the medieval landscape, in gardens tucked behind monasteries, cottages, and manor houses, grew the quiet healers of the Middle Ages, herbs. Long before the age of modern medicine, plants were the foundation of all healing, and the care of the mouth was no exception. Every village had its herbalists, every monastery its apothecary, and every household its little garden patch of mint, sage, and rosemary. From these simple plants, medieval people drew comfort, medicine, and the means to keep their teeth and breath clean. Nature to them was God's pharmacy, a living testament to his care for humankind. Among the most beloved of these plants was sage, whose Latin name *salvia*, comes from the word *salvare*, meaning to save. Sage was believed to strengthen the gums, whiten the teeth, and purify the breath. Monks often planted rows of it near their kitchens, not only for cooking, but for health. A common recipe for a mouth rinse involved boiling sage leaves in wine or vinegar, straining the liquid, and using it warm to wash the mouth. Some chewed the leaves directly, letting the bitter oils work their way across the tongue. Its flavor was sharp, but it left the mouth feeling clean and refreshed. In many monastic texts, sage was praised as a holy herb that brought balance to the humors and protection from illness. Mint was another favorite, prized for its cooling and fragrant qualities. It grew easily in damp soil and spread quickly, filling the air with freshness. People chewed mint leaves after meals to aid digestion and sweeten the breath. It was also used to flavor wines and herbal teas, especially for those suffering from evil vapors or tooth pain. Mint water, steeped overnight and rinsed in the morning, was thought to restore the mouth's pleasant humor. In summer, travelers carried small bundles of dried mint or pennyroyal to chew on long journeys, keeping their mouths moist and their breath fresh under the hot sun. Asterisk, asterisk, rosemary, asterisk, asterisk, and asterisk, asterisk, thyme, asterisk, asterisk were also common, both valued for their antiseptic properties, though no one used that word yet. Rosemary boiled in wine was used to rinse sore gums, and thyme was burned in sick rooms to purify the air. The connection between smell and health ran deep in the medieval mind. Pleasant scents were believed to ward off disease, while foul odors signaled corruption. Thus, herbs that sweetened the air also sweetened the mouth. A sprig of rosemary behind the ear, or a bit of thyme chewed after meals, served both beauty and protection. Perhaps the most mysterious of all was asterisk, asterisk, myrrh, asterisk, asterisk, a resin imported from the East at great cost. Apothecaries mixed it into tooth powders and pastes for the wealthy, believing it could heal ulcers and strengthen gums. Its bitter taste and aromatic scent made it a favorite in monastic infirmaries, where monks used it sparingly in healing ointments. In religious symbolism, myrrh represented both purification and sacrifice, connecting bodily care with the divine. To rinse with myrrh water was, in some sense, to participate in a sacred act, cleansing both flesh and spirit. A knowledge of these herbs did not belong to one class or gender. In villages, asterisk, asterisk, wise women, asterisk, asterisk, were the keepers of healing lore, their knowledge passed down through generations. They knew which herbs grew best in shadow, and which thrived in sunlight, which should be gathered at dawn, and which under the full moon. For toothaches, they might crush sage and salt into a paste, or heat vinegar with rosemary to make a soothing rinse. They made poultices from onions, garlic, and honey to draw infection from swollen jaws. Though often mistrusted by the church for their independence, these women were vital to their communities. Their remedies bridged the gap between faith and practicality, and their gardens were sanctuaries of life and healing. In monasteries, herbal medicine became a disciplined science. Monks carefully recorded recipes in illuminated manuscripts, describing not only how to use herbs, but when and why. They understood the seasons, the humors, and the symbolic properties of each plant. The asterisk, asterisk, herbarium, asterisk, asterisk, or monastic garden was laid out with order and purpose. Paths of crushed stone wound between neat beds of chamomile, fennel, sage, mint, and hyssop. The air was filled with scent, and the quiet hum of bees served as background music to prayer and labor. In the early morning, before matins, a monk might gather herbs for the day's work, some for cooking, others for healing. A small bundle of sage and mint might be taken to the infirmary, dried and crushed, then brewed into tea for those with aching teeth or swollen gums. Herbalists, whether monks or laywomen, worked by observation and memory. They noticed which remedies soothed pain and which worsened it. Over generations, this knowledge formed a practical wisdom that, while lacking modern explanation, often proved effective. Sage tightened the gums. Clove, when it became available through trade, dulled pain. Honey in wine cleansed wounds. Even the simple act of rinsing with warm herbal water reduced bacteria, though medieval people understood it as the washing away of corruption. The results were the same: comfort, healing, and relief. The role of herbs extended beyond physical care. To many, these plants carried spiritual meaning. They were symbols of God's generosity, gifts meant to heal and sustain. The asterisk physica asterisk of Hildegard of Bingen, a renowned 12th century abbess and herbalist, describes herbs not only in terms of their healing powers, but their divine origin. She wrote that sage contains the greenness of virtue and that mint warms the soul. To heal the body was to restore divine harmony, and herbs were the bridge between heaven and earth. In this worldview, brushing one's teeth with sage or rinsing with rosemary was not only hygiene, it was an act of thanksgiving. In rural homes, the herbal tradition was lived rather than written. Women hung bundles of mint and thyme from the rafters to dry, crushing them into powders for cooking or cleaning. Children chewed sage or parsley leaves before church to smell fresh. On feast days, herbs were burned as incense or scattered on the floors to perfume the air. Even in death, herbs accompanied the faithful, tucked into coffins or laid on graves as symbols of purity and renewal. The same plants that eased toothaches and sweetened breath also marked the passage between life and eternity. The legacy of medieval herbalism survives even today. Many of the plants they relied on, mint, sage, clove, myrrh, remain staples of modern dental care, their properties confirmed by science centuries later. What began as intuition and faith has become chemistry and medicine. Yet, in a way, the heart of it remains unchanged. When we rinse with mint or brush with clove-flavored toothpaste, we repeat the same gestures of those who lived long ago, seeking freshness, healing, and a little comfort from the earth. In the next chapter, we'll all look at how teeth were seen not only as tools for eating or symbols of health, but as emblems of beauty, morality, and even sin. From bright smiles in illuminated manuscripts to warnings in sermons, we'll explore how the simple act of showing one's teeth carried meanings far beyond the physical in the Middle Ages. In the Middle Ages, teeth were more than bones hidden behind lips. They were symbols. They spoke silently of strength, virtue, beauty, and sometimes of sin. To the medieval mind, every part of the body carried meaning, and the mouth held special power. It was the vessel of speech, prayer, nourishment, and temptation. To show the teeth was to reveal something of the soul, whether noble or wicked. Thus, the condition and appearance of one's teeth became deeply entwined with moral, spiritual, and social identity. Beauty, as understood in the medieval world, was never merely physical. It reflected divine order, the harmony between inner virtue and outer form. A beautiful face mirrored a pure heart. In poetry and song, a fair lady was often praised for her bright eyes, fair skin, and teeth white as milk or gleaming like pearls. Such imagery appeared in courtly romances and religious texts alike, linking whiteness and purity both literally and spiritually. To have clean, even teeth, was to embody grace. It was not only attractive, but godly. Even the Virgin Mary, in medieval hymns and imagery, was sometimes described with a mouthful of white lily, an allusion to purity and holy speech. But beauty could also deceive. Religious writers warned that outward perfection might conceal inner corruption. A lovely smile, they said, could hide a sinful tongue. Preachers used the image of rotting teeth to symbolize moral decay, the way sin eats away at the soul as decay eats at enamel. One popular sermon from the 13th century compared a gossiping tongue to a worm that lived among foul teeth, whispering poison and corruption. To keep the mouth clean, therefore, was not only an act of hygiene, but one of moral discipline. The mouth that prayed should not also curse. The teeth that received holy bread should not bite with anger or lust. Clean teeth symbolized restraint, the control of the body's appetites, both physical and spiritual. In art, teeth often revealed character. Medieval painters and sculptors rarely showed open mouths unless the figure was laughing, grimacing, or damned. To show teeth was considered indecent in polite portraiture, a sign of excess or wild emotion. In depictions of sinners and demons, wide mouths filled with crooked teeth symbolized gluttony, greed, and savagery. The devil was often drawn with fanged jaws devouring souls. A grotesque parody of the human mouth turned monstrous by sin. Meanwhile, saints and holy figures were painted with serene closed lips, their mouths instruments of prayer rather than passion. The contrast between pure and impure mouths served as a moral lesson in stone and pigment. The connection between teeth and morality also appeared in literature. In medieval bestiaries, Books describing animals with moral interpretations. Creatures with sharp teeth, like wolves and dogs, represented aggression or lust. Gentle animals, like sheep and deer, had small, even teeth and symbolized innocence. Writers often borrowed these metaphors for people. A knight with strong teeth might be praised for courage, while one with broken or blackened teeth might be mocked for weakness or sin. Even popular proverbs drew from this symbolism. Rotten teeth, rotten soul, one medieval saying went. Another warned, guard thy tongue, lest thy teeth bear witness. For the wealthy, maintaining good teeth was part of presenting a moral and social ideal. A noble with clean teeth showed not only wealth, but discipline. Care of the mouth became a mark of refinement, suggesting moderation in eating and drinking, virtues admired in Christian society. Manuals of courtly behavior advised against laughing too loudly or showing one's teeth in public, as such behavior was thought to be unseemly or coarse. Even joy was to be controlled, contained within a composed smile. This restraint mirrored the Church's teachings that beauty was best expressed through humility, not display. Teeth also played a role in gendered ideals. Women's smiles were often described as gentle, modest, and bright, symbols of purity and temperance. Men's teeth, by contrast, were praised for strength, firmness, and symmetry, signs of vitality and authority. A woman with dark or missing teeth might be pitied as fallen or ill, while a man with broken ones could be seen as battle-worn but still noble. These double standards reflected a world where appearance, morality, and class were inseparable. Clean teeth marked a virtuous woman and a disciplined man. Rotten teeth, by contrast, suggested carelessness, vice, or poverty. Beyond morality and beauty, teeth were also symbols of mortality. They outlasted flesh, surviving long after the body had decayed. In ossuaries and charnel houses, where bones were kept after burial, skulls with their intact teeth reminded the living of life's brevity. Memento mori, remember you must die, became a central theme in late medieval art. A tooth, unchanging and white, stood as both a relic of the body and a warning. It was the last smile of death, a grin that mocked vanity. Poets wrote of death's jaw as the great equalizer, where kings and peasants alike lost their finery and stood bare before God. The tooth, once a symbol of beauty, became a relic of impermanence. Still, not all associations were grim. Teeth were also symbols of vitality, appetite, and power. Strong teeth meant the ability to eat, to live, to survive. In battle, knights were described as gnashing their teeth in fury, their jaws a metaphor for determination. In folk tales, wolves and lions with shining teeth symbolized courage and hunger for justice. Even in their savagery, teeth carried life force, the energy of existence itself. This duality, purity and power, beauty and death, made them potent symbols in every layer of medieval thought. The religious imagination wove these ideas into daily life. When people cleaned their teeth with herbs or rinsed with wine, they were not only maintaining hygiene, but participating in a deeper ritual, one that bridged body and soul. The mouth was sacred. It spoke prayers, sang hymns, and received communion. Keeping it pure was an act of devotion. The teeth within were like the gates of a holy temple, guarding the words and sustenance that entered and left. To let them decay was to neglect one's duty to the Creator. And so, behind every polished smile or whispered prayer, lay a tapestry of meanings, moral, spiritual, and social. Teeth were small but mighty symbols, shaping how people saw themselves and one another. They represented the balance between body and spirit, between the fleeting and the eternal. And though we no longer speak in the language of humors and virtue, we still echo those beliefs in our own way, when we smile to show kindness, when we cover our mouths in shame, or when we seek comfort in the small daily act of brushing. The meaning of teeth, it seems, has always been more than just their shine. In the next chapter, We'll move from metaphor back to superstition, exploring the strange and fascinating world of medieval tooth myths, charms, and magical beliefs. From tooth forms to moonlit rituals, we'll uncover the blend of fear, faith, and imagination that shaped how people protected their teeth in a time of mystery and wonder. To live in the Middle Ages was to inhabit a world where faith and superstition walked hand in hand. Every illness, every pain, every strange sensation in the body carried meaning, divine, natural, or magical. The mouth, being the gate between the inner and outer worlds, was especially mysterious. Toothaches, in particular, were among the most dreaded torments of medieval life. Because their cause was invisible, people filled the mystery with imagination. Out of this darkness emerged a rich web of myths, charms, and superstitions, some whimsical, others terrifying, that reveal how deeply medieval people sought to make sense of their suffering. One of the most enduring and peculiar beliefs was that of the **toothworm**. This idea, dating back to ancient Mesopotamia, persisted through the Middle Ages and beyond. It was thought that small worms lived inside the teeth, wriggling and gnawing whenever decay or pain set in. The sensation of throbbing pain was imagined as the worm's movement, and when the ache ceased, it was said the creature had gone dormant or died. This belief was so widespread that many remedies claimed to draw out the tooth worm. Healers would burn herbs like henbane or mallow and direct the smoke into the mouth, hoping the worm would flee. When bubbles or bits of residue appeared afterward, people saw them as proof that the creature had escaped. Even centuries later, folk healers still spoke of smoking out the toothworm, passing the myth from one generation to the next. Tooth forms were not the only supernatural cause of dental pain. Some believed toothaches were sent by evil spirits, especially as punishment for sin or broken oaths. In parts of rural Europe, people thought that failing to pray before bed or neglecting to attend Mass could invite demons that sat upon the teeth in the night. To prevent this, certain prayers were whispered before sleeping, often addressed to Saint Apollonia, the patron saint of dentistry. Apollonia's story was well known. A Christian martyr whose teeth were violently pulled out during her persecution. She became the heavenly protector of all who suffered oral pain. Many medieval people carried small pendants of her likeness or burned candles in her honor when pain struck. To pray to her was to seek not only healing but endurance. The Church, while cautious of superstition, often adapted these folk practices into accepted ritual. Priests blessed herbs used in mouth rinses and encouraged prayers for health. A sick person might visit a shrine and leave a small offering, a wax model of a tooth, molded in thanks or supplication. In some regions, teeth pulled by barber surgeons were buried at crossroads or near church walls, so the pain would not find its way home. In others, people threw them into the fire while reciting charms such as **tooth, go to God's fire. Pain, pain, stay no higher." These acts, half prayer and half spell, reflected a worldview where faith and magic were never far apart. Children, too, had their own customs. When a child lost a tooth, it was often thrown onto the roof, tossed into the hearth, or buried in the garden with a rhyme or blessing. "Little mouse, take my tooth, give me a new one," was one common charm across Europe, a predecessor to the modern tooth fairy tradition. The mouse, with its sharp little teeth, symbolized renewal and strength. Parents believed that by offering the tooth to a small creature known for gnawing, their child's new teeth would grow in strong. The ritual, both protective and playful, reminded families that even in hardship, tradition carried comfort. Astrology also influenced dental superstition. Medieval people believed at certain times of year, or even specific days of the moon, were better or worse for tending to the teeth. Pulling a tooth during the wrong phase could, it was said, bring lasting pain or sickness. Almanacs and medical texts listed favorable times for dental work, often tied to the zodiac. Aries and Taurus, the signs ruling the head and neck, were especially important. Some physicians refused to perform extractions if the stars were not right, preferring to wait for the heavens to align. The stars, after all, were thought to guide both fate and flesh. Amulets were another layer of protection. Some people wore small pouches containing herbs like sage, juniper, or salt, believed to keep the tooth spirit away. Others used bones of animals or fragments of ivory carved with sacred symbols. The most devout might wear a small piece of parchment inscribed with Latin prayers, such as asterisk, Christus vincit, Christus regnat, asterisk, Christ conquers, Christ reigns, folded 3 times and tied with thread. The amulet was to be worn near the heart, its power drawn from both word and faith. If pain struck despite it, one might blame not the charm, but their own sin or neglect. Superstition also dictated behavior. People were warned never to throw away food scraps or bones at night, lest wandering spirits use them to gnaw the teeth of sleepers. Some avoided whistling after dark, believing it called tooth demons. Others would not point at their teeth in a mirror, fearing it invited decay. Such beliefs, though strange to us, offered structure to an uncertain world. Pain, after all, needed meaning, and superstition gave it shape, transforming suffering into something that could be bargained with, soothed, or understood. Even professional healers were not immune to these ideas. Barber surgeons sometimes chanted short phrases under their breath while pulling teeth, blending prayer with practice. Herbalists timed their remedies to moon cycles. Monks copied both scripture and spells into their medical manuscripts, carefully distinguishing between holy blessings and folk words. Medicine and magic were not opposites, but partners, 2 sides of a single coin. The medieval world accepted mystery as part of life, not something to be banished, but something to live with respectfully. What stands out most in these old beliefs is not ignorance, but imagination. Without microscopes or modern medicine, people still sought patterns, stories, and hope. They turned pain into myth, decay into meaning. To believe in a tooth worm or a saint's protection was not foolish. It was human. It was a way to make sense of a world where suffering seemed arbitrary and life fragile. In their charms and prayers, they found courage, and in their small rituals, they found peace. Today, the toothworm lives only as a metaphor, and Saint Apollonia's name lingers mostly in dental offices and old churches. But the spirit behind those beliefs, the desire to understand, to control, to comfort, remains timeless. We still light candles when afraid, still whisper small promises when pain strikes, still reach for rituals when reason runs out. The medieval tooth myths remind us that belief itself is a kind of medicine, one that heals the mind, even when it cannot touch the body. In the next chapter, we'll explore how these beliefs and practices slowly gave way to innovation, how early inventors, travelers, and physicians began crafting the first real dental tools and instruments, marking the dawn of something new, the beginnings of dentistry as a craft. As the Middle Ages slowly gave way to the Renaissance, the world began to change, not all at once, but in quiet, deliberate steps. Curiosity replaced superstition. Observation began to challenge tradition. And though the barber surgeon still reigned as the master of tooth pulling, new tools and new ideas began to emerge, laying the earliest foundations for what would one day become dentistry. It was an age of experiment, courage, and occasional disaster, when human hands and minds reached for better ways to ease suffering, even without fully understanding why those methods worked. The medieval tooth had long been a mystery, a battleground of pain and superstition. But by the 13th and 14th centuries, scholars and healers in places like Salerno, Montpellier, and Bologna began to study the human body in greater detail. The rediscovery of ancient Greek and Arabic medical texts, especially those of Hippocrates, Galen, and Avicenna encouraged a more systematic approach to health. Anatomical study, though still restricted by church and custom, slowly gained ground. Surgeons started to learn not only what to do, but why. In this spirit of inquiry, the tools of oral care began to evolve. The simplest tools, of course, were still everyday items. The tooth cloth, a small square of linen used to wipe and polish teeth, remained common among the poor and the rich alike. But some craftsmen began making specialized instruments for cleaning the mouth. Tiny metal scrapers appeared, thin, curved tools for removing buildup between the teeth. Early references call them dentiscalpia, or scalers. They were made of iron or brass and often accompanied barber surgeons on their travels. Some were crude and sharp, others delicate and precise. Though their use was limited, they represented an important step, the first attempt to preserve teeth rather than simply pull them out. More elaborate devices appeared in the hands of skilled barber surgeons in cities like Paris and London. One such instrument was the pelican named for its curved beak-like shape. Made of steel, it was designed to grip a tooth near the gum line and lever it out with controlled force. Earlier tooth extractions had often relied on brute strength, but the pelican allowed for precision, or at least the attempt at it. Later came the tooth key which worked like a door key, turning against the tooth's root to extract it more easily. These tools, though fearsome in appearance, reduced the risk of shattering the jaw or breaking neighboring teeth. They marked the shift from raw strength to careful technique. Cleaning tools, too, became more refined. Wealthy households began importing small brushes from the East, precursors to the toothbrush. These were made from bone or wood, with stiff boar bristles set into drilled holes. The idea likely came through trade with China, where similar tools had been used for centuries. Though rare and expensive, they fascinated Europeans. In time, these exotic brushes inspired local artisans to create their own versions, sometimes with softer materials like horsehair or plant fibers. For most people, however, chewing sticks remained the practical choice. Twigs from willow, hazel, or fruit trees, chewed until frayed into a soft brush. Simple, effective, and free, they continued to serve as the toothbrush of the common folk. At the same time, apothecaries and early physicians began experimenting with new tooth powders and pastes With trade expanding across the Mediterranean, ingredients once rare became accessible: myrrh, cinnamon, clove, camphor, and alum. These substances were ground and blended with chalk or pumice to create more sophisticated cleaning agents. Manuals of medicine recommended them not only for hygiene, but for strengthening the gums and whitening the teeth. The recipes became more standardized, reflecting the growing precision of medicine. A 15th century Venetian apothecary's manual, for instance, lists a powder for the purifying of the teeth that combines burnt shells, coral, and sage to be applied with a damp cloth. Though harsh, it reflected a new mindset that teeth could be maintained, not merely endured. The Renaissance love of anatomy further accelerated this shift. As artists like Leonardo da Vinci began sketching the human body with unprecedented detail, physicians followed suit. Drawings of skulls and teeth appeared in early medical texts, revealing a growing fascination with human structure. The mouth was no longer a mystery of humors and forms. It was a machine of flesh and bone, subject to study and understanding. Leonardo himself made detailed studies of the jaw and teeth, noting how they fit and functioned. Though his insights would not influence dentistry directly for centuries, they symbolized a change in perspective. The body was no longer sacred and untouchable, but something that could be explored, repaired, and improved. Yet progress was uneven. For every innovator, there were still countless barber surgeons working by instinct and experience, guided more by tradition and science. Their workshops remained places of rough pragmatism, the smell of wine and vinegar, the gleam of iron, the hum of fear. But slowly, their instruments improved. The edges were sharpened more cleanly, the handles better balanced, and the techniques more deliberate. Some even began to preserve extracted teeth, studying their shapes and roots. A few curious surgeons noticed that certain herbs reduced swelling or slowed decay. They didn't yet know of bacteria, but they observed cause and effect, the beginnings of medical reasoning. The printing press, invented in the mid-15th century, helped spread this new knowledge. Medical manuals, once copied by hand and confined to monasteries, could now reach barber surgeons, apothecaries, and scholars across Europe. Instructions for preparing mouthwashes, powders, and herbal rinses became standardized. Illustrations of instruments and procedures circulated, guiding those who had never apprenticed under a master. For the first time, the care of the mouth was not a secret art, but a teachable skill. Even as knowledge advanced, the cultural meaning of teeth remained potent. Clean, strong teeth still symbolized health, beauty, and virtue, while missing or blackened ones carried stigma. For this reason, false teeth began to appear, crudely made from animal bone, ivory, or even human teeth taken from the dead. These early dentures were uncomfortable and fragile, but they hinted at the future. Vanity and innovation, once enemies, began to work together. The desire for beauty pushed invention forward. By the end of the Middle Ages, oral care had evolved from a matter of superstition to a craft grounded in observation. The tools may have been primitive, but the intent was new: to preserve, to heal, to understand. Pain was no longer accepted as fate. It was a challenge to overcome. From the humble tooth cloth to the terrifying pelican, from herbal rinses to polished ivory, the medieval world had sown the seeds of dentistry, the art and science of keeping the human smile alive. In the next and final chapter, we'll follow this journey into the dawn of modernity, as the Renaissance and early modern world transformed centuries of trial and superstition into the disciplined practice of dentistry we know today. By the close of the Middle Ages, Europe stood on the threshold of transformation. Trade routes stretched wider, books multiplied, and the old walls of superstition began to crack under the weight of discovery. Medicine, long a blend of prayer and guesswork, was slowly becoming a science. And within this awakening, the care of teeth, once left to barbers, monks, and folk healers, began its slow journey toward becoming a profession of its own. The road to modern dentistry was uneven, sometimes brutal, often inspired, but it began with the same timeless desire: to relieve pain and preserve the smile. In the early Renaissance, curiosity about the human body deepened. Artists and scholars like Leonardo da Vinci and Andreas Vesalius studied anatomy, not as an abstract idea, but as a living reality. Their drawings revealed teeth and jaws in remarkable detail, structures once hidden by taboo, now mapped with precision. Vesalius's great work, De Humani Corporis Fabrica *, published in 1543, included some of the first accurate illustrations of dental anatomy. For the first time, the mouth was seen not as a mystery of humors or spirits, but as a system of bone, muscle, and nerve. It was a turning point. Understanding replaced myth. At the same time, the tools of the trade continued to evolve. The old pelican gave way to the tooth key *, a curved instrument that gripped a tooth and rotated it out of its socket, reducing breakage. Later refinements added adjustable claws and smoother handles, improving precision and control. Though the process was still agonizing, extractions became faster and safer. Apothecaries began refining painkillers and disinfectants, alcohol, vinegar, clove oil, and laudanum, which offered modest relief. These developments reflected a growing spirit of experimentation, as healers learned from both success and failure. By the 1600s and 1700s, a new figure emerged: the tooth drawer, or dentist, distinct from the barber surgeon. These practitioners specialized in oral care, setting up shops in towns and cities. They cleaned, whitened, and replaced teeth, and when necessary, pulled them with practiced efficiency. Traveling dentists performed their art in public squares, displaying gleaming tools and offering free demonstrations to attract customers. Theirs was a mix of medicine and showmanship, science and spectacle. Some were charlatans who sold powders and elixirs with grand promises. Others, genuine innovators, laid the groundwork for the modern profession. Tooth replacement, too, saw innovation. False teeth crafted from bone, ivory, or even human donors became fashionable among the wealthy. Early dentures, though clumsy and uncomfortable, represented hope, a way to restore dignity after loss. By the late 18th century, artisans began making them with porcelain, giving rise to a new craft that blended art and anatomy. The first dental plates appeared, fitted with springs and wires to hold them in place. They were fragile and imperfect, yet revolutionary in concept. The human smile, once surrendered to time and decay, could now be rebuilt. The scientific study of teeth advanced rapidly alongside these practical arts. In 1728, the French surgeon Pierre Fauchard published Le Chirurgien Dentiste the surgeon dentist a monumental work that systematized dental knowledge. Fauchard described in detail the anatomy of the teeth, methods for treating decay, and procedures for filling cavities using lead or tin. He even recommended cleaning teeth daily with a brush and mild powder, advice that would sound perfectly modern today. With his book, dentistry was no longer a craft or a curiosity. It was a profession rooted in study and skill. Fauchard's influence spread quickly across Europe. Schools of dentistry formed in France and England. Barbers were gradually separated from surgeons, and surgeons from dentists. Specialized instruments were designed, finer scalers, forceps, and drills. The toothbrush, once a luxury, became a household item, spreading through trade with China. Tooth powders were sold in apothecaries, now flavored with mint and sweetened with sugar, to appeal to a growing consumer class. What had once been an improvised morning ritual became a habit, a quiet ceremony of self-care. Meanwhile, the understanding of disease continued to evolve. The discovery of circulation, the study of nerves, and the first glimpses of microbiology changed everything. Pain was no longer seen as punishment or imbalance, but as a physiological process. By the 19th century, dentists were using anesthesia, ether, and nitrous oxide to numb pain during extractions. Soon after, sterilization practices, pioneered by figures like Joseph Lister, made dental work far safer. Within just a few centuries, the practice that had begun in smoky medieval workshops had entered a new era, one guided by science, comfort, and precision. Yet even as dentistry became modern, traces of the old world lingered. The language of care, cleansing, balance, purification still echoed the medieval ideals of harmony and virtue. Herbs like sage and mint, once gathered by monks and wise women, remained in use for their proven properties. The daily act of brushing and rinsing, humble and repetitive, carried the same quiet symbolism it always had, a moment of renewal, a gesture of respect for the self and for life. In that sense, the spirit of the Middle Ages, the faith, patience, and ritual, lived on, transformed but never lost. If a medieval villager could see us now, with our bright toothpaste, electric brushes, and painless dental visits, they might think we live in an age of miracles. And in a way, we do. But the miracle is not only technology, it is continuity. The same desire that led them to rub their teeth with ash, to chew mint leaves, to whisper charms against pain, is the desire that leads us to care for ourselves today. To clean the mouth is to seek order amid chaos, to reclaim control over what time and life wear down. It is an act of hope, timeless, human, and deeply familiar. So as this story closes, imagine the long chain of hands across history. A monk with a sprig of sage, a peasant rinsing at the well, a barber gripping his iron pliers, a noblewoman dabbing her lips with rose water, and finally you brushing your teeth before bed. The tools have changed, the science refined, but the purpose remains the same. In the soft rhythm of your evening routine, you echo 1,000 years of history, a quiet conversation between past and present, between the living and those who came before, all bound by the simple wish to greet the day with a clean mouth, a calm heart, and a small, enduring smile. And now, as our journey through time comes to a gentle end, take a slow breath and let your body relax. We've traveled across centuries, from smoky medieval cottages and candlelit monasteries to the marble halls of kings and the first glimmers of science. We've seen how people, in every age, searched for the same small comfort you may be seeking now, a way to feel clean, calm, and at peace. Even in the Middle Ages, when life was hard and uncertain, people still cared for their teeth, their smiles, and their breath. It was a daily ritual of dignity, a way to show gratitude for being alive, for having another morning, another meal, another moment. As you rest, think of those small acts. A woman at dawn rinsing her mouth with cool well water, a monk chewing a sprig of sage after prayer, a farmer smiling through worn teeth after a long day in the fields. Each of them, in their own time, cared for themselves in the same quiet way you do now. Across all those centuries, human hands have always reached for balance, to clean, to soothe, to find a sense of order in a world that often feels uncertain. If you've enjoyed this story tonight, I invite you to take a moment, when you are ready, to subscribe to Asterisk History for Sleep. Asterisk. It helps this little corner of calm history reach others who, like you, enjoy drifting off to stories of the past. You can also leave a comment about what kind of history you'd like to hear next, or when you listen. Do you fall asleep to these stories at night, or let them play softly through the quiet hours? Your thoughts help shape the stories yet to come. So now, let your mind wander back from the medieval world, away from the echo of the church bells and the scent of rosemary and wine. Let your breath slow, your body settle. You are safe here, wrapped in stillness, surrounded by the faint memory of 1,000 forgotten mornings. Somewhere deep in the past, someone is rinsing their mouth at the break of dawn, preparing for a day long gone. And here you are, doing the same, caring for yourself, gently, simply, in the soft rhythm of the present. Close your eyes. Let history fade into silence. And as the last traces of the Middle Ages drift away, may you rest easy, knowing that even the smallest acts, like brushing your teeth, connect you to generations of people who found peace in the same small rituals. Good night, traveler. Sleep well, and let the past keep you company until morning.